Hello, I'm Rick from the Homesteader Store. This is another in our series of equipment for rookies. Today we're going to look at how a robotic mower works. So we've kind of set up a model of what a typical property would be like. This today is these boxes are going to be our house. We have a driveway up there. We have a flower or shrub bed over here. We have a tree over there. And so we're going to look at the system and how it works and how it could maybe apply to you. So the first thing we want to talk about is the robot itself. The robot, this particular robot, is an extremely smart robot. Smart by meaning that it has many sensory things that a typical floor sweeping robot would not have. So this robot has GPS mapping, it's called. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. It has blade sensing, so it senses how much it is cutting and how much it needs to cut. It actually continually senses inside, outside. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But it is a very smart thing. It works extremely well. So let's look at, first of all, how it does this. It mows for approximately an hour. And then when it reaches 20% charge, it goes into search mode to come back to what's called the base station. It plugs itself in and charges for approximately an hour and then goes back out. Now, with the mowing, this mower mows much different than a typical mower. It mows continuously. And so when it's mowing continuously, it mows most of the day, every day. And so the clipping size that it cuts off is only a 1/4 inch long. The 1/4 inch clipping falls easily into the grass and actually fertilizes it. So a typically robotically mowed lawn is much thicker, it's much plusher, and therefore we don't need to cut it near as high. A typically mowed lawn is cut to a higher length to prevent drought damage. And so with this mower, because the grass becomes so thick, it is like a canopy in a rainforest. And I actually have some footage that I can show you in regard to that. But it mows for approximately an hour, and it does that by doing random patterns. Now, early in the spring, I normally program it to do what's called spiral cutting. And so if it finds a very thick piece of grass, it will stop its random pattern and then go into a circular motion. And it will cut that very thoroughly. Now, this pattern is tracked by the GPS mapping. This is monitored by a GPS system that will make sure that it covers all aspects of the yard, including very remote areas like would be up in the front of your property off to the side of your driveway. And so it very, very thoroughly does that. And it mows, like I said, continuously. And so it mows through most of the day and most of the night. This mower will mow rain or shine, night or day. And you have the opportunity to schedule it into what you see fit. Like, for example, if you have a watering system that goes off at a certain time, you can program this not to go out at that time. So you have complete control of that in the app, which I'll talk a little bit more a little bit later. Now let's look at how this thing works. First of all, you have this base station, which I mentioned. The base station sits outside all of the time, and it is used by the robot as the center for all the signals. So in this, all the wires that are placed on the property and in the property all come to the base station, and the signals are generated by the base station. The first set of wires that are installed, and how this thing knows its limits, is because there is a wire in particular put around the outside that's called the boundary wire. The boundary wire sets the limits to how far the robot can go. The robot has a sensor approximately here in the robot that is continually sensing inside, outside. And so it needs to always sense that it is inside the wire. If for any reason it goes outside of the wire, it will immediately stop and send its owner, or me as the dealer, will send me a signal that it is outside of the wire. So that sensing is going on all the time. Now, that boundary wire also includes things like beds like this and trees. These, in robotic terms, are called islands. Even though this is a shrub bed, a wire is placed around the island, but it is attached to the boundary wire. And if you notice, and I'll show this one over here, that the wire run right next to one another, going out to the bed and then back around it and back. And when the wires are right next to one another like this, they cancel the signal. So the robot does not sense that as being there, and the robot will pass right over it. But it will read the island as outside. So it will never enter the island area. Like, it will never go into this bed. All right? So that needs to be strategically set up. The next is the guide wire. That's this wire that it goes through the middle here. The guide wire is a wonderful feature that the Husqvarna Automower has that allows it to find remote areas, and then from those remote areas return back to base in an efficient manner. So this guide wire actually guides the unit. So when it gets to 20% charge, it goes into search mode. Normally, if you have a guide wire, you program it to try find the guide wire first, and that will bring it back to station. The second way, if it cannot find the guide wire, it will find the boundary wire. It will follow the boundary wire right back to station. The third way is that the station itself generates a signal that if the robot goes anywhere near it, it will sense it's near the station and plug itself in. It's a very, very efficient system in getting it back to base station. Now, the GPS mapping assists in this. It actually plots where the guide wire is in the property, or where they are. There are sometimes two guide wires. In this case, there's a single guide wire. That as it maps, it goes to the extreme parts, but it knows through the GPS mapping that maybe hasn't reached the extreme. And so it will continually search for that until it has reached all the extremes of the property to be mowed. That is the wonderful part about this, in that it really covers the entire yard in a very efficient manner, and it remembers and maps the layout. It is not GPS tracking. It is GPS tracking, but it is not GPS tracking. It's much more than that. All right, so next, let's look at the install. The install is normally performed by a professional, and because it's very strategic in how you go about laying out the wires so that the robot will find its way back to the station and operate and cover and mow all the different areas. Normally, we would trench this wire in with a very special trencher that will lay the wire about 2 to 3 inches below the surface. That 2 to 3 inches deep will protect the wire from damage normally, and it will also prevent it from UV damage, ultraviolet light damage. Now, the exception is we put the wire on the surface going out to the islands, which would be the beds and the trees again. We do that so we make sure the wire is very, very close together so it cancels each other out. And we actually stake that in place very tightly, and you'll see very quickly the grass will cover it over, and will actually through time work its way into the soil. So the other part of the control of this particular unit is it's abbreviated the AMC app, which is the Automower Connect App. Most of us in slang call it the Connect App. This is the Automower app, the Connect App, and it controls the mower, and it tells you right now that this unit is parked, as you can see behind me, and that it's getting ready to mow. And the features on here are excellent. You have on this side you have the full schedule, like this is scheduled to mow continuously. I can actually change this very easily. And but here's the real cool thing. This is actually the GPS tracking of where it is mowed. And you can see this is mowed inside my house in the living room here. And you can actually see the directions that it has covered. And then you can return easily to the dashboard and know exactly what the unit is doing. So a wonderful app, extremely easy to use, and to do all the settings on it as well, because here you just hit settings and you have all the different settings come up, and you can easily change from setting to setting. So now, part of this, and one of the biggest questions we have, is what about someone just coming along and taking it? Well, that's pretty difficult because there's 3 different levels of security for this. One is that it is PIN code connected. For it to operate, you must have the PIN code. The second is that it actually has a lift sensor, security sensor, that if it is lifted in any way, there are sensors right here in the front that will automatically tell that someone has picked this unit up. You will immediately get a message that someone has lifted the unit. So here's what happens if someone were to pick this up. You go, pick it up like this. It sets off. Notice the lights are flashing, and immediately the alarm sounds. To shut it off, I need to put the PIN code in. And it stops. So the security then, the third part of this is that it's GPS tracked. The GPS knows where this unit is. So it's basically impossible to steal and get away with it. So it is very secure. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the different models and what they would be for the different yards and how you would apply them. But this is an awesome system. And so let's take a look at the different models and how they might apply to you. So let's take a minute and go through the different models from Husqvarna. They're called Automowers, and the Automower base model is the 115H, which does 0.4 acres mowable, which is about 0.6 acres total if you take the house off and the driveway and so forth. This has a single guide wire, and it uses random patterns to mow. The second gets into the X series. This is the 315X, and it uses the GPS mapping now to include in coverage of the lawn. So this has a single guide wire and also mows 0.4 acres mowable, which is about 0.6 acres total or less. The middle line of the Husqvarna Automower lineup is the 430X. The 430X mows 0.8 acres mowable. It would then be approximately an acre, acre and a tenth yard it would be placed on. It has 2 guide wires, which allows you to get to 2 remote areas. The largest unit in the Husqvarna lineup is the 450X. The 450X will do 1.25 acres mowable. I have this mowing on up to 2 acres total. This unit has 3 guide wires to get to 3 remote areas. Now the newest in the lineup is the 435X all-wheel drive. This is specifically designed for steep slopes. This unit has 2 guide wires, mows 0.8 acres mowable, an acre to an acre and tenth total. So this unit does 35-degree slopes, where the rest of the Automowers still do very steep slopes, where they are mowing approximately 24-degree slopes up to that level. So excellent. Now there's one other model I don't have here, which is very similar to this model, but it's the commercial version, and that is the 550. The 550 does not have the onboard programming. So that is the Automower lineup, and so hopefully there's one in there that would fit your application. We want to thank you for joining us today. Hopefully this has been helpful in understanding how a robotic mower works. I'm Rick from the Homesteader Store, and this is another in our series of Equipment for Rookies.